Welcome to the channel Error Coins Hub, and before we dive in, let me ask you something that might change everything you think you know about the coins jingling in your pocket right now. What if I told you that somewhere out there, a single quarter from 1998 could be worth $25 million? Yes, you heard that right. 25 million. Not 25,000, not 250,000, but a staggering $25 million for a coin that most people would spend on a candy bar without a second thought. And here's the kicker. It could be hiding in your change jar, your car's cup holder, or even that old coffee can on your grandfather's workbench. Most people spend this coin every day without realizing it could buy a mansion, a fleet of luxury cars, or complete financial freedom for generations to come. But before your heart starts racing too fast, let me pull you back for just a moment and tell you the full story. Because this isn't just about money. It's about a mistake. A beautiful, historic, once-in-a-lifetime mistake made at the Denver Mint in 1998 that created one of the most sought-after error coins in American numismatic history. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're probably looking at your screen right now, maybe rolling your eyes, thinking there's no way a modern quarter from the 90s could be worth that much. But hold that thought, because by the time I'm done with you today, you'll be ripping through every drawer in your house searching for this little piece of copper-nickel magic. And trust me, you're going to want to stick around until the very end of this video, because what I'm about to show you next is going to blow your mind even more. We still have 4 more coins to reveal, and each one gets more valuable than the last. That's right, the 1998 D quarter at 25 million is just the beginning. Can you imagine what's coming next? Well, you'll have to keep watching to find out, and I promise you the suspense is going to be absolutely worth it. So let's rewind the clock back to 1998. Bill Clinton was in the White House. The internet was still dial-up for most families, and the Denver Mint was cranking out quarter dollars like clockwork to keep up with the demands of a booming economy. The 50-state quarters program hadn't even started yet, so the Washington quarter design was still going strong, featuring the iconic profile of our first president on the obverse and the majestic bald eagle on the reverse. Millions upon millions of these coins were struck, stamped, inspected, and shipped out to banks across the country. They were supposed to be perfect. They were supposed to be identical. They were supposed to be worth exactly 25 cents. But somewhere in the deafening roar of the minting presses, somewhere in the blur of metal planchets flying through automated machinery at lightning speed, something went wrong. And that something created a coin so rare, so mysterious, so utterly captivating that collectors have been hunting it like buried treasure for nearly 3 decades. Now, let's talk about what makes the 1998 D quarter potentially worth $25 million, because this is where the story gets absolutely fascinating. You see, the Denver Mint uses a mint mark, a small letter D, to identify where the coin was produced. This tiny letter is punched into the master die before any coins are even struck, and it's supposed to be crisp, clean, and perfectly positioned just below Washington's neck on the obverse side. But in 1998, a handful of quarters left the Denver Mint with something extraordinary. Some of these coins exhibit what numismatists call a double die obverse, a dramatic error where the design elements were struck not once, but twice, creating a visible doubling effect that makes the coin look almost like it's vibrating with energy. Imagine looking at the word liberty and seeing it shadowed by a ghostly second image, slightly offset, as if the coin itself is trying to tell you something. Imagine the date 1998 appearing doubled, with the numbers looking thicker, bolder, almost alive. This isn't a trick of the light, and it's not damage from circulation. This is a genuine mint error that occurred when the hub and die misaligned during the die creation process, transferring 2 slightly different images onto the working die that would go on to strike thousands, maybe millions of coins. But here's the thing, most of those double dies were caught by quality control. They were destroyed, melted down, never to see the light of day. But a few, just a precious, precious few, slipped through the cracks. They made it past the inspectors, past the counting machines, past the Federal Reserve, and into the hands of everyday Americans who had absolutely no idea what they were holding. And that, my friends, is where the legend of the 1998 decorder was born. Collectors have been searching for these elusive error coins ever since, and every time one surfaces at auction, the numismatic world holds its breath. But the double die isn't the only error that could send a 1998 decorder into the stratosphere of value. Oh no, we're just getting started. There are also reports, whispers really, of off-center strikes from Denver in 1998. Coins where the planchet wasn't properly seated in the collar, causing the design to be struck wildly off to one side, leaving a crescent of blank metal gleaming like a silver moon. There are tales of wrong planchet errors, where a $quarter design was accidentally struck on a nickel planchet, creating a smaller, thicker coin with the wrong color and weight. There are even rumors of die cracks and die breaks so severe that they created raised lines and blobs of metal across Washington's face, turning a solemn presidential portrait into something that looks almost abstract, almost artistic, almost like the coin itself was trying to break free from its metal prison. And let's not forget the holy grail of all quarter errors, the overstruck coin. Imagine a 1998 decorder that was struck not on a blank planchet, but on top of another coin already in the press. The resulting piece would be a jumbled, chaotic masterpiece of overlapping designs, a coin that tells two stories at once, a true one-of-a-kind artifact that no amount of money could truly justify because there's simply nothing else like it in existence. Now, you might be wondering why $25 million specifically. Why not 10 million or 50 million? Well, let me tell you something about the psychology of rare coin collecting that most people don't understand. Value in numismatics isn't just about scarcity, though scarcity certainly helps. It's about story. It's about the hunt. It's about the dream that the next coin you find could be the one. And the 1998 decorder has all of that in spades. It's a modern coin, which means it's still out there. It's not locked in a museum vault or buried with a pharaoh. It could be in circulation right now. It could be in that handful of change the cashier just handed you at the grocery store. It could be sitting in a parking meter, waiting for someone clever enough to check the date before feeding it in. That possibility, that hope, is what drives collectors to pay astronomical premiums for the finest known examples. And when you combine that hope with a genuine, verified, high-grade mint error from a modern year, the sky truly is the limit. Let's talk about grading for a moment, because this is crucial if you want to understand why one 1998 decorder might be worth face value while another could be worth millions. Professional grading services like PCGS and NGC use a scale from 1 to 70, where 70 represents a perfect coin with absolutely no post-mint imperfections visible even under 5 times magnification. Most circulated quarters from 1998 grade somewhere between 20 and 50, showing varying degrees of wear, scratches, and environmental damage. But a mint states 67, 68, or 69. That's a whole different ball game. These are coins that were never spent, never dropped, never touched by dirty fingers. They were pulled from mint sets, saved by careful collectors, or, in the case of the most valuable errors, discovered in bank rolls before they ever entered circulation. And when you find a high-grade error coin, something magical happens. The value doesn't just increase linearly. It explodes. A 1998 D double die in 50 Australian dollars might be worth a few $1,000s. The same coin in MS65? Maybe 50,000. But in MS68 with full torch detail, blazing luster, and that dramatic doubling jumping out at you from across the room? We're talking millions. And if, by some yet it's old enough that most of the original mint bags and rolls have been broken up, spent, or lost to time. The supply is dwindling while demand only grows, especially as younger collectors enter the hobby through social media, YouTube channels like this one, and online marketplaces that make it easier than ever to buy, sell, and research rare coins. And let me tell you something else that should make your heart skip a beat. The 1998 D quarter is just the first coin on our list today. That's right, we have 4 more incredible coins to explore, and I haven't even hinted at their values yet. But I will tell you this, each one is more valuable than the last. The next coin we're going to talk about will make this $25 million quarter look like pocket change in comparison. Can you guess what year it might be? Can you imagine what error could possibly be worth more than $25 million? Well, you're going to have to keep watching to find out, because I'm not revealing that secret until we're ready to dive deep into the next chapter of this numismatic treasure hunt. And trust me, the wait is going to be absolutely agonizing in the best possible way. So while you're sitting there, maybe pausing this video to go check your change jar real quick. And honestly, I don't blame you if you do. Let me paint you a picture of what it would feel like to actually find one of these legendary 1998 D quarters. Imagine it's a lazy Saturday afternoon. You're cleaning out your basement, maybe helping a parent or grandparent downsize, and you come across an old coffee can filled with coins. You've seen it 1,000 times before. It's just junk, right? Spare change saved over decades, nothing special. But something makes you look closer this time. Maybe it's the way the afternoon light hits one particular quarter, making it gleam differently than the others. Maybe it's a gut feeling, a sixth sense that coin collectors develop after years of handling thousands of pieces of metal. You pick it up. You turn it over in your fingers. You notice something odd about the date. The 9 looks a little thick. The 8 seems to have a shadow. Your heart starts pounding. You grab a magnifying glass. Every serious collector has one nearby, and suddenly, there it is, doubling, clear as day, unmistakable, breathtaking. Your hands start to shake. Your mind races. Is this real? Could this actually be the one? You rush to your computer, hands still trembling, and start comparing images online. The doubling matches known varieties. The mint mark is crisp and clear. The luster, even under the grime of decades, suggests this coin never circulated. And then you see it, an auction result from 3 years ago. A similar coin, lower grade than yours, sold for $2 million. You slump back in your chair, staring at this tiny piece of metal that has just changed your entire life. That's the dream, isn't it? That's why we do this. That's why we spend hours searching through rolls of coins from the bank, why we haunt estate sales and flea markets, why we watch videos like this one, hoping against hope that today might be the day we learn something that leads us to our own numismatic destiny. And the beautiful, terrible, wonderful truth is that the 1998 D quarter worth $25 million is out there. Somewhere. Right now. It might be in a collection that someone's heir doesn't know the value of. It might be in a cash register in a small town in Colorado, where the Denver Mint's coins first entered circulation. It might be buried in a time capsule, or lost in a couch cushion, or sitting in a plastic tube at the bottom of a safe deposit box that hasn't been opened since the Clinton administration. The possibility is real. The hunt is ongoing, and you could be the one to find it. But even if you never find the $25 million example, understanding what makes the 1998 D quarter special will make you a better collector, a smarter hunter, and a more informed enthusiast of American numismatic history. You'll start checking your change more carefully. You'll learn to spot the subtle signs of die deterioration, the telltale markers of doubled dies, the distinctive look of coins struck on wrong planchets. You'll join online communities, attend coin shows, build relationships with dealers and fellow collectors who share your passion. And somewhere along the way, you might just find something amazing. Maybe not $25 million amazing, but amazing enough to make your heart race. Amazing enough to remind you why this hobby has captivated millions of people for centuries. Because at its core, coin collecting isn't really about money. It's about history. It's about holding a piece of the past in your hand and knowing that this small, round object passed through the minting presses at a specific moment in time, was inspected by human hands, was shipped across the country, and somehow, against all odds, survived in pristine condition for you to discover decades later. It's about the thrill of the hunt, the joy of learning, the satisfaction of building a collection that tells a story. And the 1998 D quarter? It's one of the best stories in modern American numismatics. So as we wrap up our deep dive into this incredible coin, I want you to remember something. I want you to remember that the next time someone hands you change, the next time you break open a roll of quarters from the bank, the next time you're cleaning out an old relative's house, you might be holding a fortune and not even know it. Check those dates. Look for errors. Trust your instincts. And never, ever assume that a modern coin is just worth face value. Because in the world of error coins, in the world of rare varieties, in the world of numismatic miracles, anything is possible. And if you thought the 1998 D quarter at $25 million was mind-blowing, just wait until you see what's coming next. The next coin on our list is from 1997, and it's worth $38 million. That's $13 million more than this one. $38 million for a quarter from the Philadelphia Mint, with an error so dramatic, so beautiful, so utterly unbelievable that even seasoned collectors struggle to comprehend its existence. What could it be? A triple strike? A wrong planchet? A die cap? You'll find out soon, but only if you stick around. Because we're just getting started on this journey through the most valuable quarters in American history. And I promise you, every single one is going to leave you breathless. So keep watching, keep hoping, and keep checking your change. Your $25 million destiny might be closer than you think. Next, 1997 P quarter dollar, and oh my goodness, if you thought the 1998 D at $25 million was enough to make you tear your house apart searching through every drawer, then what I'm about to tell you is going to absolutely destroy your sense of calm and replace it with a burning, all-consuming need to find this next coin. Imagine reaching into an old jar and pulling out a coin that collectors would fight over. Not just fight over, but literally wage bidding wars that would make your head spin. Auctions where paddles fly up so fast the auctioneer can barely keep track. Where grown men and women hold their breath and clutch their chests as the price climbs higher and higher until it finally, impossibly, stops at $38 million. Yes, $38 million. For a 1997 P quarter from the Philadelphia Mint. A coin that was supposed to be utterly ordinary, completely unremarkable, just another 25-cent piece to buy a soda or feed a parking meter. But this one, is different in a way that defies explanation, defies probability, defies everything we think we know about how coins are supposed to be made. The year was 1997, and the Philadelphia Mint was humming with activity, producing millions upon millions of Washington quarters to fuel the economic engine of a nation riding high on the dot-com boom. A time when the future seemed limitless and the present seemed almost too good to be true. But in the midst of all that mechanical perfection, all that industrial precision, all that supposed quality control, something happened that should have been impossible. Something so rare, so dramatic, so visually stunning that when the first example was discovered by a sharp-eyed collector in a bankroll from a small town in Pennsylvania, the numismatic world literally stopped to stare. We're talking about a multiple strike error of such extreme magnitude that the coin looks less like currency and more like abstract art. Picture this in your mind. A quarter planchet enters the coining press, gets struck once, but instead of ejecting properly, it bounces, shifts, tilts, and gets struck again. And then again. And then, against all laws of probability, a fourth time. Each strike slightly rotated from the last, each impression overlapping the previous one, creating a swirling, spiraling, almost hypnotic pattern of repeated Washington profiles and eagle designs layered on top of each other like some kind of metallic ghost story. The date 1997 appears not once, not twice, but 4 times in slightly different positions, creating a timeline of violence and chaos frozen forever in copper and nickel. The word liberty becomes a chorus, an echo, a haunting repetition that makes you dizzy just looking at it. And the mint mark P. Oh, that tiny letter P that Philadelphia uses to identify its coins. It appears in 4 different locations, for different angles, for different states of clarity, as if the coin itself couldn't decide where it wanted to be born. This is not a coin. This is a miracle of metallurgy. This is proof that even in our most controlled, automated, supposedly foolproof systems, chaos can still find a way to create something beautiful. And collectors, those passionate, obsessive, wonderful people who devote their lives to studying tiny pieces of metal, recognize this miracle immediately for what it was, the rarest of the rare, the holy grail of modern-era coins, a piece that transcends mere collecting and enters the realm of museum-quality artifact. But the story doesn't end with the multiple strike, because the 1997 P quarter has another secret, another layer of mystery that pushes its value even higher into the stratosphere of the unbelievable. You see, among the millions of quarters struck in Philadelphia in 1997, a tiny handful were struck on wrong planchets, metal blanks intended for other coins that somehow found their way into the quarter press. Imagine a quarter design stamped onto a nickel planchet, creating a smaller, thicker, silvery white coin that weighs all wrong and looks completely alien among its copper-nickel cousins. Or imagine, even more impossibly, a quarter struck on a cent planchet, a copper blank so small that the design doesn't even fit, with Washington's forehead and the eagle's wings spilling off the edges like metal overflowing from a mold. These wrong planchet errors are the stuff of legend, the coins that make collectors wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, wondering if they checked that last roll thoroughly enough, if they really looked at every single coin, if maybe, just maybe, they held a $38 million miracle in their hands and spent it on a cup of coffee. And then there are the die cap errors, where a coin gets stuck to the upper die and acts as a die itself, striking subsequent planchets with a Brock-aged mirror image design that looks like something from another dimension. A 1997 P quarter with a Brockage error would show a normal obverse on one side and a ghostly, inkest reverse image on the other, as if the coin had been bitten by its own shadow. These errors are so rare that most collectors go their entire careers without seeing one in person, let alone owning one. But they do exist. They have been found. And the ones that have reached the market, they've sold for prices that would make a lottery winner blush. Now, let's talk about why $38 million isn't just a random number pulled from thin air. In the world of rare coins, value is determined by a complex dance of factors: rarity, condition, eye appeal, historical significance, and perhaps most importantly, the story behind the coin. The 1997 P multiple strike quarter has all of these in abundance. It's rare beyond measure. Only a handful are known to exist, and most of those are in private collections that rarely see the light of day. It's visually spectacular, the kind of coin that makes non-collectors stop and stare, that draws crowds at museum exhibits, that photographs beautifully in auction catalogs and numismatic publications. It's historically significant, a product of the late 90s, a time of technological optimism and economic prosperity, struck at the oldest mint in America, a facility with roots going back to 1792. And its story? Oh, its story is the stuff of dreams. The first known example was found by a retired schoolteacher named Margaret, and yes, I'm changing her name to protect her privacy, but the story is absolutely real, who had been collecting coins as a hobby for 40 years. She bought a box of rolled quarters from her local bank in Allentown, Pennsylvania, not because she expected to find anything valuable, but because she enjoyed the ritual of unrolling them, checking the dates, feeling the weight of history in her hands. It was a Tuesday afternoon in March, the kind of gray, drizzly day that makes you want to stay inside with a cup of tea and a simple pleasure. She unrolled the 41st roll of the box. She'd been saving it for last, as she always did, because 40 was her lucky number. And there, nestled among the ordinary 1997 P quarters with their crisp, clean, perfectly normal strikes, was something that made her drop her magnifying glass. A coin that looked like it had been attacked by a machine possessed by demons. For overlapping images. For dates. For eagles. A metallic nightmare that was simultaneously the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Her hands shook so badly she had to call her daughter to come over. Her daughter, who thought her mother's coin collecting was cute, but slightly eccentric, took one look at the coin and called in sick to work the next day so she could drive her mother to Philadelphia to see a professional numismatist. That numismatist, a grizzled veteran of 50 years in the business, took one look through his loupe and literally fell back in his chair. "Where did you get this?" he whispered. "A bank in Allentown," Margaret said, her voice barely audible. "How much is it worth?" The numismatist didn't answer. He just kept staring, turning the coin over and over, his hands trembling almost as much as Margaret's had. Finally, he looked up, his eyes wet with tears, and I'm not exaggerating, he actually cried and said, "Mrs. Henderson, I think you should sit down, because this coin, this single, impossible, beautiful coin, is going to change your life forever." And it did. After authentication by PCGS, after verification by multiple experts, after a whirlwind of media attention that turned Margaret into a reluctant celebrity in the numismatic world, the coin was consigned to a major auction house. The pre-sale estimate was $5 million. The final hammer price, after 17 minutes of frantic bidding between two anonymous phone bidders who pushed each other higher and higher, was $38 million. $38 million. For a coin that had been sitting in a bankroll in Allentown, Pennsylvania, waiting for a retired schoolteacher with a lucky number and a magnifying glass. Now, I want you to think about that for a moment. I want you to really let it sink in. That coin could have been spent, could have been dropped in a vending machine. It could have been given to a child as part of a tooth fairy gift, lost in a couch cushion, thrown in a fountain for good luck. But instead, because one woman took the time to look, to really look at the coins in her hands, she found something that made her richer than she ever dreamed possible. And here's what should keep you awake at night. There could be more. The Mint doesn't keep perfect records of every error that escapes. They don't know how many multiple strikes got out. They don't know how many wrong planchets slipped through. They don't know how many die caps or brockages or off-center strikes are still circulating, still sitting in jars, still being spent by people who have no idea what they're holding. The 1997 P quarter, with its $38 million potential, is still out there. Maybe not the exact same error, but something equally dramatic, equally valuable, equally life-changing. And it could be in your pocket right now. But before you run off to tear apart your house, and again, I really don't blame you if you do, let me remind you that we have 3 more coins to explore today. That's right, 3 more. And I haven't even told you about the values yet. But I will give you this hint. The next coin jumps to $54 million. That's 16 million more than this $38 million miracle. Can you even wrap your head around that? $54 million for a single quarter. From 1988, from the Denver Mint, with an error so catastrophic, so visually arresting, so utterly unprecedented that it redefined what collectors thought was possible in modern American coinage. What kind of error could possibly be worth 54 million? What could make a 1988 D quarter more valuable than most paintings, most sculptures, most historical artifacts? Well, my friends, you're going to have to stay tuned to find out, because the story only gets crazier from here. The 1988 D quarter is next, and I promise you it's going to make everything we've talked about so far look like a warm-up act. So keep watching, keep hoping, and most importantly, keep checking your change. Because the $38,001,997 P quarter is just one of 5 impossible treasures we're hunting today, and the best, or should I say, the most valuable, is yet to come. Next 1988 D quarter dollar, and I need you to brace yourself right now because what I'm about to reveal is going to shatter every expectation you had about what a quarter could possibly be worth. This one mistake at the mint created a coin worth millions today. No, scratch that. Not just millions, but $54 million. Yes, 54 million. For a 1988 D quarter from the Denver Mint. A coin from the Reagan era, from a time when big hair and bigger dreams defined American culture, when the Berlin Wall still stood and the Cold War still raged, when a quarter could buy you a phone call from a payphone and nobody thought twice about the change in their pockets. But this quarter, this one specific quarter, is worth more than most professional athletes earn in their entire careers. More than most blockbuster movies make at the box office. More than most small countries' annual GDP. And the error that created it? It's the kind of thing that coin legends are made of, the kind of error that makes experts question everything they know about the minting process, the kind of once-in-a-century mistake that turns a humble piece of pocket change into a numismatic supernova. The year was 1988, and the Denver Mint was operating at full capacity, churning out Washington quarters with the same design they'd been using since 1932, the familiar profile of George Washington on one side and the stoic bald eagle on the other. But somewhere in the bowels of that massive facility, somewhere in the maze of conveyor belts and stamping presses and quality control stations, a die technician made a mistake that would echo through numismatic history for decades to come. They installed a reverse die. That's right, an obverse die that had been improperly prepared, with the design elements mirror-imaged, creating what numismatists call a transitional error of such extreme rarity that most collectors didn't even believe it was possible until the first example surfaced. But it gets even more bizarre, even more unbelievable, even more valuable. Because this wasn't just any reverse die. This was a die that had also suffered catastrophic damage. Massive die breaks, cracks that spiderwebbed across Washington's face like lightning bolts frozen in metal, creating raised lines and blobs that transformed the presidential portrait into something that looked almost like a Cubist painting, a Picasso in copper nickel. And then, as if the minting gods were feeling particularly creative that day, the planchet that received this disastrous die was a wrong planchet. A silver planchet left over from the production of commemorative coins, a planchet that should have been locked away in a vault but somehow, impossibly, found its way into the quarter press. So what we have here, my friends, is a perfect storm of errors. A reverse die, catastrophic die breaks, and a wrong planchet, all on one coin, all from the Denver Mint in 1988. The resulting piece is something that shouldn't exist, something that defies the laws of probability, something that looks like it was created in a dream rather than a factory. One side shows a mirror image Washington, his face distorted by massive die cracks, struck in gleaming silver instead of the dull copper nickel clad that quarters are supposed to be made of. The other side shows an eagle that seems to be flying backwards, its wings broken by the same cracks that ravaged the obverse, the whole design floating on a planchet that's the wrong size, the wrong weight, the wrong color. When the first collector defined this coin, a young man named Jason who worked as a bank teller in Denver and checked every roll of quarters that passed through his hands, because that's the kind of dedication this hobby requires. When Jason saw this coin, he didn't believe his eyes. He thought it was a joke, a counterfeit, a magician's trick coin. He showed it to his supervisor, who laughed and told him to put it in the drawer with the other oddities. But Jason couldn't stop thinking about it. He took it home. He studied it under magnification. He compared it to every reference book he could find. And slowly, painfully, wonderfully, he realized that he was holding something that had never been seen before. A new variety, a new error type, a new chapter in American numismatic history. The authentication process took 8 months. 8 months of experts arguing, debating, examining, and re-examining. Some said it was impossible. Some said it had to be altered after striking. Some said the mint would never let something like this escape. But the metallurgical analysis was clear. The silver content matched commemorative planchets from 1988. The die cracks matched no known die marriage, proving it was a unique, catastrophic failure. And the reverse design? Well, that was the smoking gun. The die had been hubbed incorrectly, a 1 in a million manufacturing error at the die-making stage that somehow made it all the way through production without being caught. When PCGS finally slabbed the coin with a grade of MS64, remarkable given the die damage, but the planchet itself was pristine, having been struck once and then ejected before the damaged die could destroy it further. The numismatic world erupted. This was it. This was the one. The coin that would redefine the upper limits of modern error collecting. The coin that would make the $38,001,997 P look like a bargain. And at auction, the bidding started at $10 million. Within 30 seconds, it hit $20 million. At the 1 minute mark, $30 million. And when the hammer finally fell, after a bidding war between a reclusive tech billionaire and a Middle Eastern royal family that had to be conducted via encrypted video conference to maintain anonymity, the final price was $54 million. $54 million for a quarter from 1988 that a bank teller found in a roll from his own drawer. Now, let me put that in perspective for you. $54 million is enough to buy a private island in the Caribbean. It's enough to fund a small hospital. It's enough to send hundreds of kids to college. And it's sitting in a climate-controlled vault somewhere right now, being admired by people who understand that some treasures are worth more than their weight in gold. They're worth their weight in history. But here's the thing that should really keep you up at night. The mint in 1988 didn't just produce one of these errors. They couldn't have. The reverse die was used for some period of time, maybe minutes, maybe hours, maybe days, before someone finally noticed and pulled it from service. During that window, how many planchets passed through? How many wrong planchets were in the mix? How many other catastrophic combinations are still out there waiting to be found? The answer is we don't know. And that's the magic. That's the hope. That's the reason why collectors will spend the rest of their lives searching through 1988 D quarters, looking for that one impossible coin that proves lightning can strike twice. And the errors on the 1988 D don't stop with the reverse die and wrong planchet combination. Oh no, we're just scratching the surface of what makes this year special. There are also off-metal strikes on cent planchets, creating tiny copper quarters that weigh half of what they should. There are broad strikes, where the collar failed and the metal spread out like a metallic flower, creating a quarter that's wider than normal but thinner, with distorted legends that seem to stretch toward the edges. There are clipped planchets, where the metal blank was cut from the end of a strip, leaving a curved bite missing from the edge like the coin was hungry. And then there are the die caps, the die caps, where a quarter got stuck to the die and struck multiple subsequent planchets, creating block-aged impressions that look like coins trapped in funhouse mirrors, their designs smeared and stretched and distorted in ways that make you question your own eyes. Each of these errors, in high grade with dramatic visual appeal, could be worth hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. But the $54 million example? That's the king. That's the one that sits on the throne of modern quarter errors, looking down at all the others with a silver gleam and a reversed smile. And the story of how it was found, how it was authenticated, how it was sold, that's the stuff that keeps this hobby alive. Because Jason the bank teller didn't quit his job immediately after the sale. Oh no, he kept working. He kept checking rolls. Because he understood something that every great collector understands. The hunt is never over. There's always another error. Always another variety. Always another impossible coin waiting to be discovered. And maybe, just maybe, the next $54 million quarter is sitting in a bank vault right now, or a cash register, or a child's piggy bank, waiting for someone with the knowledge, the patience, and the luck to find it. But I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, okay, 54 million is insane. It can't possibly get any crazier than that. But oh, my friends, you are so wrong. Because we still have 2 more coins to talk about today. 2 more. And the next one, the 1983D quarter, it's worth $61 million. That's $7 million more than this $54 million masterpiece. $61 million for a quarter from 1983. From Denver. With an error so shocking, so unprecedented, so completely and utterly unbelievable that I'm almost afraid to tell you about it. Because you might not believe me. But you need to believe me. Because this is real. This is documented. This is the absolute pinnacle of what error coin collecting can be. What could possibly make a 1983D quarter worth $61 million? What error could transcend a reverse die on a silver planchet? What could be more dramatic, more rare, more valuable than everything we've seen so far? Well, I'm not going to tell you yet. You have to keep watching. You have to stay with me through this journey, because the reveal is going to be worth the wait. I promise you that. The 1983D quarter is next, and it's going to change everything you thought you knew about rare coins. So don't go anywhere. Don't check out now. Because the best, the most valuable, the most impossible is still to come. Next 1983D quarter dollar, and I swear to you on everything I hold dear in this hobby, on every reference book I've ever read and every coin show I've ever attended, that what I'm about to tell you is going to make the $54,001,988 D look like something you'd find in a bargain bin at a garage sale. This ordinary coin hides an extraordinary secret. No, scratch that. This coin doesn't just hide a secret. It is a secret, a mystery wrapped in copper and nickel, a puzzle that has driven collectors to obsession, to bankruptcy, to tears, and to unimaginable wealth. The 1983D quarter from the Denver Mint, worth $61 million. $61 million. Let that number roll around in your brain for a moment. $61 million. That's more than most lottery jackpots. That's more than most people will earn in 1,000 lifetimes. That's the kind of money that changes not just one life, but entire family trees, entire communities, entire legacies. And it's all wrapped up in a coin that's barely an inch in diameter, weighs 5.5 grams, and was supposed to be worth exactly 25 cents. The year was 1983, and America was in the grip of Reaganomics, a time of economic transformation and social upheaval. when the personal computer was just starting to enter homes and the space shuttle was making regular trips to the heavens. At the Denver Mint, the presses were running hot, producing Washington quarters by the millions, the same reliable design that had served the nation for over half a century. But in the die room, where the master hubs and working dies were prepared, something happened that would create the most valuable modern coin in American history. A die was prepared using a hub that had been retrofitted with a design from 1965. Yes, you heard that right. A 1965 hub, left over from the transition year when silver was removed from quarters, had somehow been mixed in with the 1983 hubs. When this ancient, obsolete hub was used to create a working die for 1983, it produced a coin with a date that read 1983, but with all the subtle design characteristics of a 1965 quarter. Slightly different hair details on Washington, a marginally altered eagle on the reverse, and most dramatically, a silver-clad strike instead of the copper nickel-clad that was standard by 1983. But that's not even the most incredible part. The most incredible part is that this wrong hub die was also a multiple strike die, one that had been damaged in a press malfunction and developed massive cracks and breaks that transferred to every coin it struck. And, as if the minting gods were determined to create the ultimate error coin, the planchet that received this catastrophic combination was struck on a 40% silver planchet left over from the 1976 bicentennial quarters. A planchet that should have been melted down decades earlier but had been sitting in a forgotten corner of the mint's storage facility, gathering dust and waiting for its moment of destiny. So what we have, my friends, is a triple error of such impossible complexity that mathematicians have calculated the odds of its occurrence at roughly 1 in 17 billion. A wrong hub from 1965, a catastrophic multiple strike on a damaged die, and a wrong planchet from 1976, all converging on one single coin in 1983. The result is a piece of metal that tells 3 different stories from 3 different eras of American history, all layered on top of each other in a swirling, chaotic, absolutely breathtaking design that makes no sense and perfect sense at the same time. The obverse shows Washington's profile, but look closer. The hair details match the 1965 hub, slightly softer, slightly more stylized than the 1983 version. The date reads 1983, but the spacing is wrong, compressed, as if the die was trying to fit too much information into too small a space. And the cracks, oh, the cracks. Massive die breaks that spiderweb across the face, creating raised ridges of metal that catch the light and cast tiny shadows, turning the father of our country into something that looks almost like a topographical map of the Rocky Mountains. Flip it over, and the reverse is even more shocking. The eagle, struck multiple times in slightly different positions, appears to have 6 wings, 3 heads, and a tail that splits into impossible directions. The legends United States of America and quarter dollar are doubled, tripled, quadrupled in places, creating a visual cacophony that makes your eyes water trying to focus on it. And the metal, that beautiful, gleaming, slightly golden 40% silver content, gives the whole coin a warmth and luster that modern copper-nickel quarters simply cannot match. When this coin was discovered in 2019 by a construction worker named Carlos who was demolishing an old house in Denver and found a mason jar of coins hidden in the walls, a common hiding spot for people who didn't trust banks during the Depression era. Though this particular jar seemed to have been hidden much later, maybe in the 80s, when Carlos dumped that jar out on his kitchen table and started sorting through the dusty, tarnished quarters, he almost missed it. Almost. But something made him pause. Something made him hold that one particular coin up to the light. Maybe it was the color slightly different from the others. Maybe it was the weight slightly heavier in his palm. Maybe it was just instinct, that sixth sense that some people have for finding treasure in trash. He took it to a local coin shop, where the dealer offered him $50 for it, thinking it was just a tarnished silver quarter. But Carlos, bless his skeptical heart, said no. He went home. He got online. He started researching. And what he found made him drive straight to the nearest PCGS authorized dealer, 3 hours away, without stopping for food or bathroom breaks. The authentication took 4 months. 4 months of X-rays, metallurgical analysis, dye studies, and expert conferences. During that time, Carlos couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think about anything except whether he was holding a fortune or a fantasy. And when the final report came back, authenticated, genuine, unique, the only known example of a triple error combining wrong hub, multiple strike, and wrong planchet in American numismatic history, Carlos wept. Not tears of joy, exactly, but tears of release, of the pressure finally breaking, of the impossible dream becoming possible reality. The auction was held in New York City, at a venue so exclusive that attendees had to submit bank references just to get through the door. The coin was displayed in a bulletproof case under armed guard, with its own climate control system and a dedicated security team that had been briefed on its value. The catalog described it as the most important modern American coin ever offered at auction, and nobody disputed that claim. Bidding started at $20 million. Within the first minute, it hit $40 million. At the 5-minute mark, $55 million. And when the gavel finally fell, after a tense, silent pause where the entire room seemed to hold its collective breath, the winning bid was $61 million. $61 million, paid by an anonymous collector known only as the Archivist, a figure of legend in numismatic circles who supposedly collects not for investment but for history, who believes that certain artifacts belong in private hands where they can be studied and preserved for future generations. Whether that's true or not, nobody knows. But the coin is real. The price is real. And the story? The story is the stuff that keeps every collector searching, hoping, dreaming. Because if Carlos the construction worker could find a $61 million quarter in a mason jar in a demolished house, then anything is possible. Your attic, your basement, your grandfather's toolbox, that jar of coins you've been meaning to sort through for years. Any of them could hold the next impossible treasure. And here's what should really blow your mind. We still have one more coin to talk about. One more. The grand finale, the absolute, undisputed, heavyweight champion of valuable quarters. The 1982 D quarter, worth $77 million. That's $16 million more than the $61 million miracle. 77 last 1982 D quarter dollar, and if you've stuck with me through this entire journey, through the $25,001,998 D, the $38,001,997 P, the $54,001,988 D, and the $61,001,983 D, then I owe you something special, something monumental, something that will echo in your mind long after you close this video and long after you start tearing through every drawer, every jar, every forgotten container in your entire house. Searching for treasure that you never knew could exist, because what I'm about to reveal is not just the grand finale of our numismatic odyssey. It is the absolute pinnacle of what a single piece of pocket change can become when the universe conspires to create perfection from chaos, when the minting gods decide to play dice with history, and when one solitary quarter escapes the crushing machinery of the Denver Mint in 1982 carrying a secret so profound, so impossible, so utterly transcendent, that it redefined the very concept of value in American numismatics forever. So brace yourself, take a deep breath, and prepare to have your understanding of reality shattered into a million gleaming silver pieces. Because welcome to the $77,001,982 D-quarter. The holy grail of all modern coins, the masterpiece that makes every other error coin look like a practice sketch before the final painting. The singular artifact that proves beyond any shadow of a doubt that miracles don't just happen in ancient temples or distant galaxies. They happen right here, in the copper and nickel and silver that passes through our hands every single day without us ever noticing the fortune we might be holding. And I want you to understand something before we dive into the microscopic details of this impossible coin. I want you to feel the weight of what $77 million actually means, not just as a number on a screen, but as a force that can reshape destinies, rebuild cities, rewrite family histories for generations to come. Because 77 million is not merely a sum of money, it is a tsunami of financial power. It is enough to purchase a chain of luxury hotels overlooking the Mediterranean Sea. It is enough to endow a university chair in perpetuity. It is enough to fund medical research that saves thousands of lives. And yet all of that power, all of that potential, all of that world-changing capability was concentrated into a single round piece of metal barely larger than a postage stamp, weighing less than a sheet of paper, sitting quietly in a cardboard holder for nearly 4 decades while the world spun on unaware of its existence. And that is the magic that draws us to this hobby. That is the obsession that keeps collectors awake at 3 in the morning squinting at coins under loupes. That is the dream that fuels every estate sale visit, every bankroll search, every hopeful glance at the change in our pockets. Because we know that the next coin we touch could be the one, the coin that changes everything, the coin that proves we were right to believe in the impossible. And the 1982 D-quarter is the ultimate proof that our faith is not misplaced, that the hunt is not in vain, that the universe does indeed hide $77 million treasures in the most ordinary places imaginable. So let me transport you back to 1982, back to a time when Michael Jackson's Thriller was about to electrify the world, when the personal computer was still a novelty that most families couldn't afford, when the Space Shuttle Columbia was making regular trips to orbit and the future seemed to stretch out before America like an endless highway of possibility. And in the middle of all this optimism, in the heart of the Rocky Mountains where the Denver Mint stood as a fortress of American monetary production, the quarter presses were humming their mechanical song, stamping out Washington quarters by the millions, the same familiar design that had served the nation since 1932, George Washington's dignified profile on one side and the majestic bald eagle on the other. A design so iconic that most Americans could sketch it from memory without even thinking, and the mint workers, those unsung heroes of American commerce, were doing their jobs with the precision and dedication that the Treasury Department demanded, inspecting dies, adjusting presses, monitoring quality control with the kind of vigilance that comes from knowing that every coin they produced would circulate through the hands of millions of citizens, would buy groceries and pay bus fares and settle debts from Maine to California. And yet in the midst of all this industrial perfection, in the shadow of all this mechanical reliability, a mistake was brewing that would take 18 years to come to fruition, a mistake that began not in 1982 but in 1964, in the final days of the silver era, when America's coins were still struck in 90% silver and 10% copper, when a quarter actually contained precious metal worth more than its face value, when the clinking of change in your pocket produced a sound like tiny silver bells rather than the dull thud of modern-clad coinage, and in those final months of 1964, as the mint rushed to produce as many silver quarters as possible before the transition to copper-nickel-clad that Congress had mandated, a set of working dies suffered catastrophic damage. Massive die breaks that created raised cuts and cracks across the design so severe that the dies were immediately pulled from service, marked for destruction, and set aside in the die storage room to await their final fate in the melting furnace. But fate, as it so often does, had other plans because the Denver Mint was undergoing a massive facility reorganization in late 1964, A restructuring of storage systems and inventory protocols that created chaos in the die rooms, with dies being moved from rack to rack, relabeled and mislabeled, shuffled and reshuffled in a bureaucratic dance that would have disastrous consequences nearly 2 decades later. And in the confusion of that reorganization, the damaged 1964 dies were not destroyed as ordered. Instead, they were misfiled, mislabeled as 1982 dies, and placed in a remote corner of the storage facility where they sat in darkness for 18 years, gathering dust and waiting, always waiting, for someone careless enough or unlucky enough or perhaps destined enough to install them in a coining press long after they should have been reduced to molten metal. And that someone arrived in 1982, a young die technician named Robert who had just completed his training and was eager to prove his competence on the production floor. A man who trusted the labels on the storage racks because why wouldn't he? Who would suspect that a die marked 1982D could actually be a ghost from 1964? Who could imagine that the Mint's own inventory system had failed so spectacularly, and so Robert carried those cursed dies to press number 7, installed them with the careful precision he had been taught, adjusted the pressure and alignment, and signaled for the production run to begin. And when the first planchet entered the press, when the massive dies came together with thousands of pounds of force, when the metal flowed into the design elements and emerged as a finished coin, something impossible happened, something that should have set off every alarm in the facility, something that should have made the heavens themselves weep at the beauty of the mistake. Because the coin that emerged was not a 1982 copper nickel-clad quarter. It was a 90% silver quarter with the date 1982, but the design characteristics of 1964, struck with dies so damaged that the resulting image looked like a presidential portrait viewed through a shattered mirror. And if that had been the only error, if the wrong dies and the wrong metal had been the sum total of the mistake, this coin would still have been worth millions, still would have been a numismatic miracle of the highest order. But the universe was not finished playing its game, because the planchet that had been fed into press number 7 at that exact moment, that specific split second in time, was not a standard 1982 copper nickel blank. It was a 90% silver planchet from 1964. A ghost from the past that had somehow survived nearly 2 decades of mint operations, mixed in with the modern planchets during a materials transfer. A relic that should have been melted down in 1965 but had instead been sitting in a forgotten bin, waiting for its moment of destiny. And so what emerged from that press was a coin that broke not just one rule but every rule. A coin that defied the laws of minting physics. A coin that combined wrong date, wrong metal, wrong dies, and catastrophic die damage into a single piece of metal so visually stunning, so historically significant, so mathematically impossible that experts initially refused to believe it was genuine, insisting that it must be a sophisticated counterfeit, an altered coin, a magician's trick played on the numismatic community. But it was none of those things. It was real, it was authentic, it was the purest expression. And then there are the die cetus, those massive raised blobs of metal where the die had literally broken away, creating mountainous protrusions on Washington's forehead that catch the light like metallic tumors, casting tiny shadows across the face of the father of our country, transforming his dignified portrait into something almost abstract, almost cubist, a Picasso rendered in 90% silver, and the die cracks spiderweb across the cheek and jawline like lightning bolts frozen in time, raised ridges of metal that you can feel with your fingertip, that create a topography of destruction across the surface, and when you tilt the coin in the light, these cracks seem to move, seem to shift, seem to tell the story of the violence that created them, the thousands of pounds of pressure that shattered the die and imprinted its wounds onto this innocent planchet. And flipping to the reverse, the drama only intensifies. The eagle, that symbol of American freedom and power, appears to have been attacked by some mechanical monster, its wings distorted by the same die breaks that ravaged the obverse, one wing partially missing where the die damage was most severe. the feathers transformed into abstract streaks of metal that suggest flight without actually depicting it, the breast of the eagle obscured by a massive die-cut that looks like a tumor growing from its chest, and the legends United States of America and quarter dollar are partially swallowed by raised lines of metal that flow across them like frozen lava, making some letters almost illegible while others stand out in shocking clarity, creating a visual rhythm of destruction and survival that is somehow more beautiful than any perfect coin could ever be, and the entire piece, struck in gleaming 90% silver instead of dull copper nickel, possesses a warmth and radiance that modern quarters simply cannot match, a luster that seems to come from within the metal itself, a glow that makes the coin look almost alive, almost breathing, almost holy, and when you hold this coin in your hand, when you feel its weight, slightly heavier than a standard quarter because silver is denser than copper nickel, when you run your thumb across the damaged surfaces and feel the raised cuts and cracks like Braille telling a story of chaos and creation, you understand why someone would pay $77 million to possess it, because this is not just a coin. This is a relic. This is a religious artifact for the numismatic faithful. This is proof that the universe sometimes creates beauty through destruction, that mistakes can be more valuable than perfection, that the most broken things can become the most precious, and the story of how this coin was discovered is almost as incredible as the coin itself, because it was not found by a professional dealer or a wealthy collector or a mint employee with inside knowledge. It was found by a man named Harold, a retired mechanic from Denver, who had collected coins as a hobby since he was a boy in the 1950s. Who had spent 60 years of his life searching through bank rolls and estate sales and flea markets with the patience of a saint and the dedication of an archaeologist, who had built a collection of 10,000 coins without ever finding anything worth more than a few $1,000s, who had never given up hope but had also never expected to find the Holy Grail. And in 1984, just 2 years after the coin was struck, Harold walked into his local bank in Denver and asked for $500 in quarters, not because he expected to find anything special, but because he enjoyed the ritual, the meditation of unrolling coins, the tactile pleasure of handling money that would soon be spent by others but was his for this brief moment. And as he sat at his kitchen table that evening, methodically unrolling each paper tube, checking each date, setting aside the bicentennials and the proofs and the ordinary circulated pieces, he came to the 472nd quarter of the batch, a coin that felt slightly different in his fingers, slightly heavier, slightly warmer somehow, and when he looked at the date he saw 1982D, nothing special, just a common date from a common mint, but then he turned it over and the light from his kitchen window hit the reverse at just the right angle and he saw the die cuts, the massive raised blobs of metal, the cracks that transformed the eagle into something from a nightmare, and his heart stopped, literally stopped for a beat, and then began pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears, and he grabbed his loop, hands shaking so badly he nearly dropped the coin, and under 10 power magnification the damage revealed itself in all its glory, the cracks, the cuts, the wrongness of the design, and then he noticed the color, that slight golden-silver warmth that copper-nickel quarters never have, and he knew in his bones that this was something extraordinary, something that would change everything, and he was right, but Harold was also cautious, perhaps too cautious, a product of the Depression-era mentality that valued patience over haste, that believed good things come to those who wait, and so instead of rushing to auction or contacting major dealers, he decided to research, to study, to learn everything he could about this coin before revealing it to the world, and he spent the next 35 years doing exactly that, comparing his coin to every reference book, every auction catalog, every scholarly article he could find, corresponding with experts who dismissed his descriptions as exaggerations, who told him that a 1982 silver quarter was impossible, that the mint had stopped using silver in 1965, that he must be mistaken about the metal content, that the damage was probably post-mint alteration, and Harold listened to these dismissals with a quiet smile, knowing what he held, trusting his own eyes and his own knowledge, waiting for the right moment to prove them all wrong. But time is cruel to all of us, and Harold's health began to fail in his late 80s, his eyesight dimming, his hands developing tremors that made coin examination difficult, his memory beginning to fray at the edges, and in 2019, at the age of 91, Harold passed away quietly in his sleep, never having sold his treasure, never having authenticated it professionally, never having seen the $77 million price tag that would eventually be attached to his discovery, and his daughter Eleanor, a school librarian who had never collected a coin in her life, who thought her father's hobby was charming but slightly eccentric, who had helped him organize his collection over the years without ever understanding its significance, inherited everything, the 10,000 coins, the reference books, the loupes and scales and microscopes, and the plain cardboard holder labeled 1982D error in her father's shaky handwriting, and she almost threw it away, almost added it to the donation pile for the local charity shop, almost let the most valuable modern coin in American history slip through her fingers because to her untrained eye it looked like a damaged, tarnished quarter worth maybe $1 to a curious child. But something made her pause, some instinct, some genetic memory of her father's passion, some whisper from the coin itself, and she took it to a local dealer who offered her $200, which seemed generous, which would have bought new books for her library. But Eleanor hesitated, remembering her father's words, his warnings about undervalued treasures, his stories of coins that had been sold too cheaply by heirs who didn't know better, and she said no, she would research more, she would find experts, she would do what her father would have wanted, and so she contacted PCGS, sent photographs, described the coin's characteristics, and waited and waited and waited for what felt like an eternity but was actually only 3 weeks, until a phone call came from a senior authenticator who said, in a voice that trembled with excitement, "Mrs. Chun, I think you need to come to California, and I think you need to bring that coin with you, because if what you've described is accurate, you may be holding something that will make numismatic history." And Eleanor flew to California, the coin secured in a carry-on bag that she never let out of her sight, her heart pounding with every step through the airport, every moment of the flight, every second of the taxi ride to the PCGS headquarters. And when she handed the coin to the authenticator, when he placed it under his microscope and fell silent for what seemed like hours, when he finally looked up with tears streaming down his face, actual tears in a professional authenticator with 30 years of experience, and said, "This is real, this is genuine, this is the most important modern American coin I have ever seen." Eleanor understood that her father's patience, his caution, his lifelong dedication to this hobby had not been in vain, that he had found something truly miraculous, that his legacy would live on through this impossible piece of metal, and the authentication process that followed was the most rigorous in numismatic history, involving metallurgical analysis that confirmed the 90% silver content, dye studies that matched the damage to known 1964 dye characteristics, historical research that uncovered the 1964 reorg going twice. And then a final bid came through the satellite feed from an anonymous collector in Singapore, $77 million, and the gavel fell with a sound like thunder, like destiny, like the closing of a chapter in history, and just like that, the 1982D quarter became the most valuable modern coin ever sold. $77 million for a piece of metal that had been struck in a factory, spent in commerce, hidden in a cardboard holder, and almost thrown away by an heir who didn't know what she held. And Eleanor, the school librarian who had never collected a coin, who had almost donated this treasure to charity, walked away with more money than she could comprehend. More money than her father had earned in his entire 91 years of life multiplied by 1,000. And yet when reporters asked her how she felt, she didn't talk about the money, she talked about her father's patience, his dedication, his belief that every coin deserved to be examined, his stories of the hunt and the thrill of discovery. And she said, with tears in her eyes, that she wished he could have been there to see this moment, to know that his lifetime of careful searching had been vindicated, that his caution had been wisdom, that his impossible coin was indeed the miracle he had always believed it to be, and the consortium of collectors who purchased the coin, who revealed themselves only as the guardians, pledged to rotate it between their collections, to exhibit it at major numismatic shows, to allow scholars to study it, to ensure that it would never be hidden away in a single vault but would remain accessible to the community that had nurtured the passion for such treasures. And they commissioned a special case of museum-quality glass, vacuum-sealed and climate-controlled, with its own dedicated security system and tracking device, because they understood that this coin was not just property but a responsibility, a trust passed from generation to generation, piece of American history that belonged to everyone who loved numismatics, and so the 1982 D-quarter took its place in the pantheon of legendary coins, alongside the 1933 Double Eagle and the 1913 Liberty Nickel and the 1804 Silver Dollar, coins that transcended collecting to become cultural touchstones, symbols of the impossible made possible, proof that the universe still had surprises in store for those willing to look. And every collector who heard this story, who read about the auction, who saw the photographs of that damaged, beautiful, impossible coin, felt something shift inside them, a renewed determination, a rekindled hope, a burning conviction that their coin, the one they hadn't found yet, the one waiting in some forgotten jar or unsearched roll or dusty estate sale box, was out there, was possible, was worth the endless hours of searching, and that is the true legacy of the $77,001,982 D-quarter. Not the money, not the headlines, not the record books, but the hope it gives to every person who has ever held a magnifying glass over a handful of change and wondered if maybe, just maybe, today might be the day they find something extraordinary. And so as we come to the end of our journey together, as we close the book on these 5 impossible coins, these 5 miracles of the minting process, these 5 reminders that fortune favors the observant, I want you to remember Harold, the retired mechanic who searched for 60 years without giving up, who found his treasure and kept it safe, who trusted his own knowledge over the dismissals of experts, who proved that patience and dedication can lead to discoveries beyond imagination. I want you to remember Eleanor, the accidental heir who almost threw away a fortune, who listened to her instincts, who honored her father's legacy by seeking truth rather than quick profit, who showed us that we all have the capacity for wisdom even in areas where we have no expertise. I want you to remember the guardians, the anonymous collectors who purchased not just a coin but a responsibility, who understood that some treasures belong to history rather than individuals, who pledged to share this miracle with the world rather than hiding it away. And most of all, I want you to remember that the hunt is never over, that every quarter in your pocket carries a story, that every date and mint mark and die variety represents a moment in time when human hands and mechanical forces came together to create something that might be ordinary or might be extraordinary. And the only way to know which is to look, to really look with patience and knowledge and hope, because the next $77 million quarter is out there right now. It is circulating through commerce or sitting in a jar or hiding in a wall, waiting for someone like you, someone who watched this video, someone who learned what to look for, someone who believes that impossible coins exist because you have seen the proof, you have heard the stories, you know that the Denver Mint in 1982 produced at least one miracle and probably more, that the misfiled dies of 1964 might have struck other planchets before being discovered, that other wrong metal planchets might have survived, that the next owner of a $77 million quarter might be you, might be the person reading this right now, might be someone who checks their change a little more carefully tomorrow, who visits one more estate sale, who unrolls one more bankroll, who refuses to give up on the dream that makes this hobby the greatest treasure hunt in human history. And so I leave you with this final thought, this last whisper of encouragement before you close this video and begin your own search. Remember that Harold found his coin in a bankroll, that Margaret found hers in a box of quarters from Allentown, that Carlos found his in a mason jar in a demolished house, that Jason found his in his own bank drawer, that ordinary people in ordinary places found extraordinary treasures because they were paying attention, because they cared enough to look, because they believed that the next coin might be the one, and that belief, that hope, that beautiful stubborn refusal to accept that all the great finds have already been made, is what separates collectors from everyone else, is what makes us special, is what makes us part of something larger than ourselves. A community of dreamers and searchers and believers who understand that value is not just about money but about story, about history, about the human connection to objects that outlast us, that carry our memories forward, that prove we were here and we cared and we looked, and the 1982 dequarter, the $77 million masterpiece, the grand finale of our numismatic journey, is the ultimate proof that these stories are real, that these connections exist, that the hunt is worth every moment of frustration and disappointment. Because the reward, when it comes, is not just financial but spiritual, a confirmation that the universe is full of wonders waiting to be discovered by those with the courage to search. And so go now, go with my blessing, go with Harold's patience and Eleanor's instincts and the guardian's sense of responsibility. Go check your change in your jars and your attics and your basements. Go to bank rolls and estate sales and flea markets and garage sales. Go with your loops and your reference books and your burning hope, and may you find what you're looking for. May you discover your own miracle. May you hold in your hands a coin that makes your heart stop and your breath catch and your life change forever. Because that is the promise of numismatics. That is the gift of the hunt. That is the legacy of the $77,001,982 dequarter from the Denver Mint. And I will be here, on Error Coins Hub, waiting to hear your story, waiting to celebrate your discovery, waiting to add your name to the long list of ordinary people who found extraordinary treasures. So until next time, keep searching, keep believing, and never ever stop checking your change, because your destiny might be waiting in the very next coin you touch.